Hey everyone, Chef Ryan and Chef Anna here from Growing Chefs Ontario for this month's kids cooking class featuring the tomato.
Tomatoes are one of my favorite summer fruits.
Hold up, fruit?
Yeah! Didn't you know that tomatoes are technically a fruit?
No, I didn't actually.
That's because we use them more like a vegetable in the kitchen. But in this tomato cake, we're using it like a fruit.
What are we making this month with it then?
A spiced tomato cake. For this recipe, we will need bowls, measuring cups and spoons, a wooden spoon, a fine mesh strainer, a hand mixer, a blender or food processor, a whisk, toothpicks, or a thermometer.
The ingredients you'll be using for this recipe are 4 eggs, 2 cups of sugar, a 1/4 cup of molasses, 1 cup of vegetable oil, 4 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 3 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, 2 teaspoons of ground ginger, and for the glaze, 1 cup of powdered sugar plus 2 tablespoons of strained lemon juice. Also, just under 2 pounds of ripe tomatoes. To start this recipe, we're going to process our tomatoes. So I have just under 2 pounds of ripe field tomatoes here. I'm going to quarter them or cut them into 4 pieces very carefully using my bear claw. And then I'm going to put the tomato on the flat side or the cut side and just remove the cores. So I'm going to do that to all of my tomatoes and put them into the blender.
While Ryan is processing the tomatoes, I'm gonna get started on our cake. So we're gonna start with our wet ingredients. And our wet ingredients includes everything that's wet plus sugar. You normally don't think of sugar as a wet ingredient, but we want it to dissolve into our eggs and our oil. So we're going to use it here. I'm gonna start by cracking all my eggs into this bowl. And then I'm going to cream it together with the sugar until it's really nice and fluffy.
If you're a little bit nervous about cracking your eggs, I find it helpful to crack them into a smaller bowl, make sure you don't have any shells in them, and then add them to the larger bowl. What are you putting in after you add the eggs, Chef Anna?
After the eggs, I'm going to add the sugar. And you can either use a wooden spoon to mix this together, or you can use a hand blender.
A hand blender?
Yes, and I have one right here. So when my eggs and sugar are very nicely blended like this, I know it's time I can add my oil. So I'm gonna do that while I have the hand blender running so everything gets emulsified together. After I've slowly added the oil, I'm also going to add the molasses because it's another type of sugar.
And the last wet ingredient going into our bowl is the star of the show, our tomatoes. So I've got all my quartered tomato pieces in my blender here. I'm going to puree it. Don't worry if there are seeds or skin or anything. It's all going to go in the cake together. So you'll probably get more tomatoes than you actually need for this recipe. So just measure out 2 2/3 of the tomato puree and add it to the mixture. You can use the rest of the puree for making a tomato sauce, or what else would it be good for?
Tomato soup.
Ooh. You can see it has a nice peachy color to it. Our cake is actually going to be a little bit darker though, isn't it, Chef Anna?
It is once we add all of our spices because this is a spiced tomato cake.
Looks like I might actually get the perfect amount.
Excellent.
There we go, and we'll blend that all together. We've got all of our wet ingredients mixed together. Now we're going to sift together our dry ingredients. So I have the flour, and I'm going to pour it into my large strainer and just shake it or whisk it through. It's really important to sift your ingredients so that you don't have any lumps. When you're mixing the wet ingredients to the dry, you don't want to find little pockets of flour or anything else in there. So I'm also going to sift my spices. So I have some cinnamon, some ginger, and some nutmeg. I also have my baking soda and my salt, and everything will go into the strainer together.
So this is a classic 2-bowl cake recipe where you'll put your wet ingredients in one bowl and your dry ingredients in another, and then just mix them together until everything is just combined.
Yeah, it's really important that you don't develop too much gluten in this cake or you'll have a tough cake.
And gluten is developed through overmixing.
Just about there. And then I'll hand this off to you, Chef Anna, to marry the two together.
Thank you. So I don't want to mix everything all together at once. I'm going to do it gradually so I don't create clumps as I mix it. So I'll probably do this in about 3 batches.
While Chef Anna is marrying our dry and our wet ingredients together, I have a 9x13 pan here, and I've just lightly buttered or sprayed with nonstick spray and then lined it with a little bit of parchment. This is just going to ensure that our cake comes out nice and easily when it's finished baking. So you can see I've left a little bit of overhang with the parchment paper. That will act as little handles for me to lift the cake out of the pan.
I can already smell the cinnamon.
I was going to say the same thing. It smells really good.
A little bit. I can already see the baking soda activating with the moisture of my wet ingredients and the acidity of the tomatoes. And you can almost hear it too if you listen really closely.
I think it's kind of cool that you can see the little flecks of red from the tomato skin in the batter. We're not trying to hide the tomato here, we're trying to promote it.
So everything is almost mixed together, but see, I'm still getting those pockets of flour, and I don't want those in my cake because I don't like the taste of raw flour. Our batter is just mixed together and it's time to go in our pan.
We have our oven preheated to 350 degrees. How long will this cake take, Chef Anna?
This cake will take anywhere from about 45 to an hour. So you want to start checking it at about 45 minutes and then go from there.
It is a very moist cake, so you can tell the doneness by inserting a toothpick into the center of the cake, and if it comes out clean, then you know that your cake is done, or Chef Anna's preferred way,
a thermometer. So I take all of my cakes to about 205 or 210 degrees Fahrenheit, and then I know it's definitely cooked.
Okay.
So this is going right into the oven. You can tell when your cake is done when you insert a toothpick into the center and it comes out clean. So we allowed our cake to cool for about 20 minutes before we cut it up. And now we're going to make a glaze.
So we have some powdered sugar or icing sugar in our bowl. We're going to add some fresh lemon juice to it, and that's it. And depending on how juicy your lemons are, you might need to add a little bit more or a little bit less. What consistency would you say we're going for here?
We want something that's not too thick so that it stays in one place, thin enough that it'll gently run off our cake, but not so thin that it runs off completely. And that's why it's also important to allow our cake to cool for a bit before we add the glaze. You also want to do this right before serving because the longer this sits, it'll dry and harden.
So I'm just going to take a little bit of our icing, sort of drizzle it over top. And like Chef Anna said, just let it run off the sides. Like that. And there it is, our spiced tomato cake.